The day I let them win, on purpose. I knew the moment it happened that I could stop it. That's the part people don't understand when I tell this story now. They assume I was blindsided, caught off guard, slow to react. I wasn't. I saw it clearly, almost calmly, like watching a car drift into the wrong lane with just enough time to hit the brakes. I chose not to. It started on an ordinary Tuesday morning, the kind that feels too quiet for anything important to happen. The office lights hummed the same way they always did, that low electrical buzz that faded into the background once you sat down. Coffee in my left hand, laptop bag on my right shoulder, badge already warm from being clipped on so many times before. Nothing felt different, except I noticed the glances. Not the obvious kind, not the wide-eyed stares or whispered gossip. These were the subtle ones. Conversations stopping half a second too late. Someone turning their screen away just a little faster than normal. A smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. I ignored it at first. You learn to when you've been in a workplace long enough. People have moods, deadlines, stress. You don't jump to conclusions. By 10:30, I knew something was wrong. My calendar invite for the weekly project sync had disappeared. I refreshed it twice, thinking Outlook was glitching again. Still gone. When I walked toward the conference room anyway, the door was already closed, voices muffled inside. Through the glass, I saw my manager at the head of the table. Next to him sat Ryan. Ryan smiled when he saw me. He didn't wave. He didn't look surprised. He just smiled, slow and knowing, like someone watching a plan click into place. That's when it hit me. I walked back to my desk instead of knocking. Sat down, opened my email, and there it was, time-stamped at 9:02 a.m., sent to the entire leadership chain. A summary document. My project. My work. My name missing. Ryan's name at the top. I scrolled slowly, not because I needed to read it, but because I needed to feel the weight of it. Every section was familiar. The phrasing, the structure, even a typo I remembered making late one night and meaning to fix later. He hadn't even cleaned it properly. He hadn't needed to, because he'd already won. I could have forwarded the original drafts. I could have pulled the version history. I could have walked straight into my manager's office and ended it in 10 minutes flat. Instead, I leaned back in my chair and let the lie breathe. People assume letting something like that happen means you're weak or scared or clueless. The truth is more uncomfortable. I was curious. I wanted to see how far they would go if they thought I wasn't watching. And more importantly, who would help them do it. Over the next few days, the shift became obvious. I stopped getting looped into decisions. Conversations happened without me. Feedback that used to come directly now arrived filtered, delayed, stripped of context. Ryan started speaking with confidence he'd never had before, presenting ideas as if they'd sprung fully formed from his own head. No one questioned it. That part hurt more than I expected. Not because I needed credit. I didn't. But because I realized how easily people accepted the story that benefited them most. Ryan was charismatic. He laughed easily, remembered birthdays, brought donuts on Fridays. I was quieter, more precise, the kind of person you relied on but didn't really see. When leadership announced that Ryan would be temporarily leading the initiative, the room broke into polite applause. He stood there nodding, humble, grateful, performing the role perfectly. Our eyes met for a second. He thought that look on my face meant defeat. What it really meant was calculation. I started documenting everything that night. Not obsessively, not angrily. Methodically. Dates. File access logs. Meeting notes. Slack messages where ideas were floated, dismissed, then magically reappeared from Ryan's mouth a week later. I saved versions, backups, screenshots. I didn't tell anyone, not a single person, because this wasn't about proving I was right. It was about timing. Weeks passed. Ryan stumbled a little under the pressure, but never enough to raise alarms. When things went well, he took credit. When things slowed, he subtly redirected blame. Not aggressively, just enough. A raised eyebrow, a carefully worded sentence. My name paired with words like delay and misalignment. People stopped asking me questions altogether. I let them. That was the hardest part, swallowing the instinct to defend myself. To explain, to correct the record. Every time I stayed quiet, it felt like tearing something loose inside my chest. But I stayed still, watching the pattern form. And then something interesting happened. Others began to copy him. A teammate reused my work without attribution. Another adjusted a document I'd built and submitted it as their own contribution. The behavior spread, not because they were malicious, but because the environment now rewarded it. That's when I realized this wasn't just about Ryan anymore. It was about a system that only looked fair until it was tested. By the time my performance review came around, I already knew how it would go. The phrases were predictable. Valuable contributor, but lacking visibility. Strong execution, needs to be more proactive. Could benefit from clearer ownership. Ownership. I nodded. Took notes. Thanked my manager for the feedback. Then I asked a single question. What does success look like here long term? He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. Over the next month, I began stepping back even more. Not in a way that looked like disengagement. In a way that looked like trust. I let others lead meetings. I shared resources freely. I encouraged Ryan when he spoke. I praised the team publicly. Privately, the cracks were widening. Ryan started making promises he couldn't keep. Deadlines slipped. Clients asked sharper questions. Metrics plateaued. Each issue alone was small enough to dismiss. Together, they formed a shape that leadership couldn't ignore forever. Still, I said nothing. Then came an email. A major review. Executive level. A full breakdown of the project trajectory, risks, and accountability. Ryan was CC'd. So was I. I read the message twice. And smiled. Because this was the moment I'd been waiting for. Not to expose him, but to let him speak. I went into that executive review knowing one thing with absolute certainty. Ryan believed he was untouchable. That confidence had been growing for weeks. You could hear it in the way he spoke now. Slower, more deliberate, like someone who expected agreement before he even finished a sentence. He'd started using phrases like my vision and the direction I've set, as if the project had always belonged to him. People nodded along, leadership included. And why wouldn't they? On paper, everything looked fine. Not perfect, but stable. Stable enough that no one felt the need to dig too deeply. That's what Ryan misunderstood. Big reviews aren't about celebrating progress. They're about stress testing the story. They're where people stop listening to confidence and start looking for consistency. The meeting was scheduled for 11. I arrived at 10:45 and chose a seat near the end of the table. Ryan was already there, pacing lightly, rehearsing under his breath. When he noticed me, he smiled again, the same smile from weeks ago, but this time there was something else behind it. A flicker of unease. Big day, he said casually. Yeah, I replied. It is. Executives filtered in one by one. Laptops opened. Water glasses filled. The room settled into that tense quiet that only exists when important people expect answers. Ryan began. He walked through the roadmap confidently. Milestones. Deliverables. Risks mitigated. He spoke as if the future was already written, as if nothing could possibly derail what he'd built. About 15 minutes in, the first question came. Not aggressive, just precise. Can you walk us through how this decision was made? Ryan answered smoothly, referencing a meeting that had happened weeks ago. I remember that meeting. I'd been there. I'd suggested a different approach, one that had been dismissed at the time. The approach Ryan was now presenting as his own. The executive nodded slowly. Do you have documentation from that discussion? Ryan paused for half a beat. Yes, he said. I can share that after. Another executive leaned forward. Why not now? The room shifted. Ryan laughed lightly, tried to keep things relaxed. Of course. Let me just pull it up. He clicked, scrolled, clicked again. Nothing. I watched his jaw tighten just slightly. He moved on, hoping momentum would save him. It didn't. More questions came. About timelines. About resource allocation. About trade-offs that had never been formally approved. Each time, His answers grew longer and less specific. That's when I felt it. The moment where the room stopped seeing him as the narrator and started seeing him as the suspect. Still, no one looked at me. Not yet. Then the question that mattered most finally landed. Who originally scoped this architecture? Ryan answered instantly. I did. The lie hung there, heavier than any document ever could. Silence followed. Not the awkward kind. The dangerous kind. The kind where people are checking their internal maps against what they're hearing. The executive's eyes shifted to me. Is that correct? Every muscle in my body went still. This was the moment where people expect a correction, a defense, a dramatic reveal. I did none of that. I met his gaze and said, calmly, I contributed early drafts. Ryan turned toward me sharply. But Ryan let it. I added, at least that's how it evolved. The executive nodded, making a note. Ryan exhaled, relief washing over his face. He thought I'd saved him. What he didn't realize was that I'd just done something far more dangerous. I'd confirmed the existence of early drafts. The review ended without a verdict. No pras, no punishment, just a promise to circle back with next steps. That was worse than failure. It meant scrutiny was coming. Ryan caught up with me afterward in the hallway. Thanks, he said quietly. I owe you. I smiled. You don't owe me anything. That night, I received the email I've been waiting for. A request for documentation. Full version histories. Decision logs. Original proposals. Sent to both of us. Ryan messaged me almost immediately. Do you have anything saved from earlier? I stared at that message for a long time. Then I replied, yes. The next day, I sent everything. Not with commentary. Not with accusation. Just files. Time-stamped. Organized. Clean. Version 1, authored by me. Version 2, revised by me. Version 3, my comments unresolved. Then the jump. Ryan's version. Same structure. Same language. Same mistakes. There was no dramatic confrontation. No shouting match. No explosive email thread. What happened instead was quieter. Ryan was removed from the project within a week. Not fired. Not publicly shamed. Just reassigned. Softly. Carefully. The kind of move companies make when they don't want attention, but need damage control. People started coming to me again. Asking questions. Seeking clarity. Acting as if nothing strange had ever happened. That part unsettled me more than the betrayal, because it meant they learned nothing. A few days later, my manager asked me into his office. I want to be honest, he said. We should have seen this sooner. I nodded. We're restructuring, he continued, and we want you to take the lead. I didn't answer right away, because somewhere along the way, the win had stopped feeling like a victory. I'd proven I was right. I protected my work. I'd exposed the truth without ever raising my voice. And yet, the system that allowed it all to happen was still standing. I took the role, not because I trusted the company again, but because I trusted myself now. I understood how power actually moved, how silence could be weaponized, how patience could be mistaken for weakness. Ryan never spoke to me again. Sometimes I wonder if he realized what really happened, that I hadn't beaten him by outsmarting him in a single moment, but by letting him reveal himself over time. And that's the part people argue about when they hear this story. Some say I should have spoken up earlier. Some say I was too calculating. Others say I did exactly what I had to do. So I want to know what you think. Was staying silent the right move, or did I let go too far? If you've ever been in a situation like this, I'd love to hear how you handled it. And if stories like this make you stop and think, stick around. There are more coming, and every one of them asks the same question in a different way. I didn't realize my life was unraveling until I found the receipt folded inside a book I never read. It was tucked between pages 200 and something, creased neatly like someone wanted it hidden but not destroyed. I remember standing in the hallway, the house quiet in that late afternoon way, holding a piece of paper that didn't make sense yet. A hotel, a date from 3 months ago, a city we'd never visited together. At first, my brain rejected it. People talk about denial like it's dramatic, but it's actually boring. It's your mind doing everything it can to keep the day normal. I told myself it was old, that it belonged to a friend, that maybe it was a gift receipt or something work-related. Then I saw the name. My name, printed cleanly at the top. The room didn't spin. I didn't sit down. I didn't cry. I just stood there, holding that receipt, feeling something cold spread slowly through my chest, like realization seeping in instead of crashing. I put the receipt back exactly where I found it. That was the first lie I told myself that day. We'd been together 6 years. Long enough that people stopped asking how we met and started asking when we'd get married. Long enough that our routines had fused into something that felt permanent. Sunday grocery runs, share passwords, inside jokes that didn't need context. Long enough that betrayal didn't feel like something that could happen to us. That night, I watched her the way you watch a stranger when you're trying to learn their tells. She talked about her day, complained about traffic, asked me if I wanted pasta or rice. Her voice didn't shake. Her eyes didn't avoid mine. She kissed me before bed like always. I lay awake long after she fell asleep, staring at the ceiling, replaying the last 3 months in reverse. Late meetings, weekend trips, she said were work-related. That one time, she came home smelling like a different soap. I hadn't wanted to see it then. I want to see it now. Over the next week, I didn't confront her. I didn't snoop dramatically or demand explanations. I did something quieter. I paid attention. I noticed how her phone never left her hand anymore. How she angled the screen away from me when she scrolled. How she'd step outside to take calls, even when the weather was bad. The worst part wasn't the suspicion. It was the realization that I'd already lost something before I even had proof. Then came the dinner. Her parents invited us over on a Thursday. Nothing special, just one of those casual meals that happen when people are comfortable. I almost didn't go. Something in me wanted distance, space to think. But I went. Halfway through the meal, her mother mentioned the trip. "The one you took together," she said, smiling at me. "You must have loved that hotel." The room went silent. I felt my fork pause halfway to my mouth. "What trip?" I asked. My partner froze. Just for a second. But I saw it. Her mother looked confused. "The conference trip. The one in..." She stopped herself, glancing between us. "Oh," she said slowly. "I thought you went together." I didn't look at my partner. I didn't need to. I already knew. That night back home, I finally asked. Not angrily. Not accusingly. "Is there something you want to tell me?" She didn't answer right away. She sat down on the couch, folded her hands, and stared at the floor like someone preparing a speech they'd rehearsed too many times. "I didn't want it to happen like this," she said. That sentence still makes my stomach drop when I think about it. She didn't deny it. She didn't apologize the way people do when they're sorry. She explained about feeling distant, about needing something different, about how it just happened. I listened quietly. Then I asked the question that mattered. "How long?" She hesitated. That hesitation told me more than the number ever could. When she finally answered, it matched the date on the receipt. 3 months. I stood up, not dramatically, just stood. "I need some air," I said. She reached for my arm, panic finally breaking through her calm. "Please don't leave like this." I looked at her hand on my sleeve and realized something terrifying. She wasn't scared of losing me. She was scared of facing the consequences. I walked out. What she didn't know was that the receipt wasn't the only thing I'd found. And what I didn't know yet was how many people had known before I did. I didn't go far that night. I just walked. Past the streetlights, past the quiet houses, past the version of my life I thought I understood. Every step felt heavier than the last, like my body was trying to keep me from moving forward into something I wasn't ready to face. By the time I circled back home, the lights were off. She'd texted. Missed calls. Long messages that tried to sound honest without actually saying anything new. I didn't reply. I slept on the couch with my shoes still on, staring at the dark ceiling, realizing how quickly 6 years could shrink into something fragile. The next morning I called in sick. Not because I was physically unwell, but because I knew if I went into work, I'd break in a way that wouldn't be quiet. I spent the day replaying moments I dismissed. conversations that fell off, times she'd been distant, and I'd blamed stress or fatigue. By evening, something else started to bother me. Her mother's comment, the way it came out so casually, like it wasn't a secret at all. That planted a seed I couldn't ignore. Over the next few days, I learned the truth piece by piece, the way you do when the lie is bigger than just one person. Her sister knew. Her best friend knew. Even a couple of mutual friends had suspected something, but chose silence because they didn't want to get involved. I was the last to know. That realization hurt more than the affair itself. It meant I wasn't just betrayed by one person. I was surrounded by people who decided my feelings were less important than keeping things comfortable. When I finally confronted her again, it wasn't emotional. It was tired. Who else knew? I asked. She tried to dodge it. Then she cried. Then she admitted it. I asked her why she stayed. She said she loved me. That's when I understood how meaningless that word becomes when it's used to justify selfishness. I moved out the following weekend. Packed what I needed. Left behind the furniture we'd picked together, the photos on the walls, the little life we'd built that suddenly felt like a stage set. The man she cheated with didn't last. They rarely do. Reality has a way of killing fantasies quickly. Within a month, she was calling again, apologizing in ways that sounded sincere but felt late. I didn't take her back, but healing wasn't immediate. It came in slow, uneven waves. Some days I felt strong. Other days, I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner. Trust didn't just break, it dissolved. What surprised me most was how people reacted when they found out I wasn't reconciling. You should forgive, they said. People make mistakes. Don't throw away 6 years. No one asked what it cost me to stay. Eventually, I stopped explaining myself. Months later, I ran into her by accident at a grocery store. Small talk, polite smiles. Two strangers who used to share everything. When we parted, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because I'd won. Not because she'd lost. But because I finally understood that walking away wasn't weakness. It was choosing myself after being ignored for too long. Sometimes I wonder what you would have done in my place. Would you have forgiven and stayed, or walked away knowing it meant starting over? If you've been through something like this, or have an opinion on it, I'd genuinely like to hear it. And if these kinds of real, messy stories resonate with you, sticking around here might be worth your time too. I didn't find out through a message, or a photo, or a confession. I found out because she suddenly became careful. Careful with her phone. Careful with her words. Careful with the way she touched me, like she was afraid of doing it wrong. At first, I thought I was imagining things. We'd been together long enough that routine could easily turn into distance. People change. Life gets busy. That's what I told myself when she stopped falling asleep on my chest. When she started turning her phone face down. When laughter felt slightly delayed, like it had to pass through a filter before reaching me. I didn't suspect betrayal. I suspected exhaustion. That's what made everything worse later. We met in a way that felt unremarkable at the time, which somehow made it feel more real. No dramatic spark. No instant obsession. Just two people who enjoyed talking longer than expected. Coffee that turned into dinner. Dinner that turned into weeks. Weeks that quietly became years. She was the kind of person who remembered details without trying. The way I took my tea. The song I always skipped halfway through. The story about my childhood I'd only told once. Being with her felt like being seen without being examined. So when things shifted, I blamed myself first. Maybe I was distracted. Maybe I wasn't present enough. Maybe love just mellowed into something quieter. I tried harder. Planned small surprises. Listen more closely. Ask questions without pushing. She responded kindly, even affectionately, which made my doubts feel irrational. If she was cheating, wouldn't she be colder? More distant? Instead, she was softer, almost guilty in advance. The first Real crack appeared during a completely ordinary evening. We were eating leftovers, sitting on opposite ends of the couch, something mindless playing on TV. She laughed at a joke, then caught herself and glanced at me. like she needed to check whether it was okay to enjoy herself. That look stayed with me. A few days later, she said she needed space. Not a breakup, just space. The word landed wrong. Too vague. Too careful. People don't ask for space when they're angry. They ask when they're conflicted. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I said okay, because I wanted to respect her and because I was terrified that pushing would confirm something I wasn't ready to face. The space stretched. Texts became shorter. Calls became rarer. When we did talk, she sounded rehearsed, like she'd already decided what version of herself I was allowed to hear. I started noticing gaps in her stories. Small ones. Where she'd been. Who she was with. Nothing dramatic enough to confront, but enough to make my instincts restless. One night, I dreamed she was standing in front of me, tried to explain something important, but every time she opened her mouth, someone else spoke for her. I woke up with my heart racing, the feeling lingering longer than it should have. That morning, I realized something uncomfortable. I didn't trust her anymore. Not because I had proof, but because my body already knew. The turning point didn't come from snooping. I didn't check her phone or follow her or demand answers. It came from a mutual friend who didn't know what they were revealing. We ran into each other by coincidence. Casual conversation. Updates. Then they said, "I didn't know you were okay with the new arrangement." I laughed instinctively because that's what you do when something doesn't make sense. "What arrangement?" I asked. They froze. Just for a second. Long enough. The rest came out clumsily. Half apologies. Clarifications that only made things worse. Apparently, she'd been spending time with someone new. Not officially dating. Not exactly hiding it either. Just existing in a gray area that everyone else seemed to understand except me. I didn't confront her that day. I went home and sat in silence, replaying every moment of the past few months with a new lens. The carefulness, the guilt, the space. It wasn't exhaustion. It was transition. I wasn't being pushed away because she needed room. I was being replaced slowly enough that she wouldn't have to feel like the villain. When I finally asked her about it, she didn't deny it. That hurt more than if she had. She said she hadn't planned for it to happen. That it just started feeling different. That she didn't want to hurt me. That she was confused. I listened without interrupting. Not because I was calm, but because something inside me had gone very quiet. There's a specific kind of pain that doesn't scream. It settles. I asked one question. "How long?" She answered honestly. "Long enough. We didn't fight. We didn't yell. There were tears, but they felt procedural, like part of a script neither of us had written, but both knew how to follow." She apologized in ways that sounded sincere and hollow at the same time. I realized then that betrayal doesn't always arrive as a dramatic explosion. Sometimes it arrives gently, politely, almost respectfully, while rearranging your life behind your back. When she left that night, the apartment felt wrong. Too quiet, too familiar, like a place that still remembered us, even though we didn't exist anymore. I sat on the floor for a long time, staring at nothing, trying to understand how something that felt so stable could dissolve without warning. What I didn't know yet was that this wasn't the full truth. Not even close. And the parts she hadn't told me, yet would change the way I understood our entire relationship. I didn't hear from her for a few days after that night. Not because we'd agreed on space or closure or anything clean like that. It was just silence. The kind that isn't peaceful. The kind that sits on your chest and makes every hour feel longer than the last. At first, I kept expecting my phone to light up. Not with an apology. Not with a confession. Just something ordinary. A mem. A "did you eat?" A reflex from a life we'd built that didn't know how to shut itself off yet. Nothing came. That's when the second wave hit. Not heartbreak. Clarity. When you're inside a relationship, you explain things away. You soften edges. You choose interpretations that hurt less. But once you're outside, details line up in ways you can't ignore anymore. I started remembering moments that had felt slightly off at the time, but now clicked into place with disturbing precision. The weekend trip she suddenly couldn't reschedule. The way she'd started dressing differently, not better or worse, just differently. The inside jokes she'd almost referenced, then caught herself. She hadn't just drifted into someone else. She'd been rehearsing a new life while still living in ours. That realization hurt more than the betrayal itself, because it meant our ending hadn't been spontaneous. It had been planned gently enough that I wouldn't notice until it was done. A week later, she reached out. Her message was long, thoughtful, careful. She said she felt terrible about how things unfolded, that she hated the idea of me thinking I wasn't enough, that what happened wasn't about me, but about her being lost. That word again, lost. It's a convenient word. It sounds tragic instead of selfish. I didn't reply right away, not because I was trying to punish her, but because I didn't know what response would actually be honest. When I finally did answer, I asked something I hadn't asked before. Did you ever think about telling me sooner? There was a long pause before she replied. Yes, she said, but I was scared you'd leave. I read that line over and over. She was scared I'd leave, so she slowly replaced me. That's when something inside me shifted permanently. I realized that the version of her I loved, the honest one, the brave one, the one who valued truth even when it was uncomfortable, had quietly stopped existing long before the relationship ended. I hadn't lost her recently. I'd lost her months ago, and I'd been mourning without knowing it. The final reveal didn't come from her. It came from someone else entirely. A few weeks later, I ran into the person she'd been seeing. I didn't plan to. I wasn't looking. Life just has a way of putting you in places you're ready for, even if you think you're not. They recognized me immediately. There was no hostility, no smagnis, just awkward honesty. They assumed I knew everything. Turns out, the story she'd told them wasn't the one she told me. In their version, our relationship had been basically over for a long time. We were living separate emotional lives. She'd said she stayed because she didn't want to hurt me, because I was fragile. Fragile. That word didn't make me angry. It made me sad, because it meant she'd rewritten me into a version that justified her choices. In that moment, standing there listening, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because it didn't hurt. It did. Deeply. But because I finally understood that the person who betrayed me wasn't the person I'd loved. It was someone new, built on half-truths and quiet avoidance. When I got home that night, I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I didn't replay conversations. I packed the last box of her things and placed it by the door. The next day, I sent one final message. I hope you find whatever you're looking for, but please don't look for it by rewriting who I was. She replied with an apology, a real one this time, or at least one that sounded closer to real than the others. I wished her well, and meant it, because holding on to anger would have meant staying connected to a story that was already finished. Healing didn't come all at once. It came in small, unremarkable moments. The first morning, I woke up without checking my phone. The first laugh that didn't feel forced. The first time I caught myself planning a future without adjusting it around someone else. Months later, I realized something important. I hadn't lost the love of my life. I'd lost someone who didn't choose me when it mattered. And that distinction changed everything. Looking back now, I don't hate her. I don't regret the time we had. It was real until it wasn't. And that's allowed. But if there's one thing I learned, it's this. Pay attention when love starts to get careful. When honesty turns gentle. When space feels like preparation. Because endings don't always announce themselves loudly. Sometimes they whisper for months, hoping you won't ask why. If you were in my place, would you have confronted sooner or trusted the silence the way I did? And if this story made you think, you know where to find more like it.